Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Let's Talk Seahawks podcast. I'm your host, Robert Smith, along with my co-host, Adam Stellman. Today, we'll be reviewing our Week 3 win against the Carolina Panthers. Adam, let's talk Seahawks.
Yeah, you know what? Actually, how about this week? You go first because we were talking before. You had some really good stuff to throw out. I'm gonna relax for the first few seconds.
All right. So first of all, Seahawks won 37-27. That last touchdown by the Panthers was in trash time. We were up 17 points. We had a bunch of backups in. Tease Tabor, who had just been signed to the practice squad, elevated to the game because he's familiar with the system from last year. He was on the field. Like, we had everybody to get experience out there. Listen, Adam Thielen got a trash time touchdown. Fine, whatever. The Seahawks basically won this game. Managers. Well, yeah, there you go. Fantasy guys, we're happy about that.
There you go.
The Seahawks basically won this game by 17, 18 points. That's great. But neither the offense nor the defense was the MVP of this game. Because let me tell you, there is one thing, and there's one thing I know to be true. And that is, if Lumen Field is a rockin', you don't come knockin'.
That's 12s, why you wanted to go first.
The 12s brought it. This was vintage Seahawks Legion of Boom era crowd. I was proud to be a Seahawks fan. I was cheering at home for the fans in the stadium because I could feel how loud that stadium was.
It was impossible not to get into this game.
I was at a playoff game, gosh, I don't know, 10 years ago. It wasn't the Super Bowl run. It was maybe year before or after. And we got tickets last minute. They ended up being in the very last row of like upper third deck, last row, maybe 35, 40 yard line. And behind that final row of seats is a cement pad. Like, it's a cement section, maybe 3-4 feet wide. And you're close enough that you can touch the roof because you're all the way at the top of the stadium. So we spent most of the game standing on that cement pad so we could look down over the whole stadium. And I'll tell you, at Lumen Field, there is not a bad seat in the house. That was great. Fantastic. But the crowd was that Seahawks crowd. You know, the 12s, they were rocking. And being up there, we were feeling the stadium shake and sway just from the crowd. And on Sunday, I guarantee there was somebody standing in that same spot that I was standing in, feeling the stadium shake as the Seattle crowd got into it. So 12s, thank you. Thank you for rocking that stadium, keeping those Panthers at bay.
Yeah, look, I think everybody during their post game and during the press conferences all this week, leading up to week 4, have mentioned. Pete Carroll certainly did. Geno Smith credited the 12s with the win. I mean, vindication up. I don't want to say that the 12s weren't a factor in week 1. Certainly, the team's performance didn't help with the crowd then, but the team fed off the crowd in this game. The crowd brought it. That was where that was where the what's the word I'm looking for? Like the pace car. They're the ones that set the agenda here. The crowd, the 12s did, and the team brought it for them. And yeah, I wish I'd been there because that must have been just a great game to watch. Exciting all the way till the end. There were defensive stops, great plays, both offense and defense. This, I think, was, I mean, certainly it's easily out of the 2 performances we've had at home this week, this is the best one. But this might be one of the best home games I've seen the Seahawks play in probably the last 2 years.
Oh, 100%. They played the
certainly in the post-Russell Wilson era, yes. So yeah.
Oh, 100%. This is the best the crowd has been since the negative reaction of the crowd towards the Broncos in that first game back. But we knew that there was going to be a bit of heat in that particular game. But this was the first true 12s showing out like they used to that we've had since Russell Wilson left.
Yeah.
So
Go ahead.
we have our 5 keys to success that we go through every single week. And let's give a quick review to see how the team did in their matchup against the Panthers based on how we, the Let's Talk Seahawks podcast, think they needed to focus on in the game. So our first one, week 2, Shane Waldron needs to show up in week 3. For me, I say not as good of a game plan as it was in week 2. Not as good of a play calling as it was in week 2. So I'm going to say not quite week 2 Shane Waldron, but it was okay. I think Shane Waldron got bailed out by some really stellar individual performances, notably Kenneth Walker. There were a bunch of plays that were bottled up where the play was designed to go. So that would be Shane Waldron. It was called to go to a specific area. And you saw Kenneth Walker bounce it. And you can tell that by looking at the blocking scheme and how the other players react. And so you know that play was supposed to go to one area. Kenneth Walker decided to take a little advantage of the defense, and he had himself a great game. So I'm going to say not quite Shane 2 week Waldron, but it's better than his game plans and his play calling have been in the past. I'd say it's not week 2, but it's probably top 5 for him since he's been in Seattle.
Yeah, look, I think you could also say the same thing about week 2. Maybe it was just individual performances bailing him out then. It did obviously look like he schemed to negate the deficiencies on that offensive line. Look, obviously, the offensive line looked better last week than it did this week, mostly in the pass blocking arena, but also with run blocking. I just think that's K9's thing. I mean, I love the fact that when he doesn't see that hole open up in front of him, he finds another one. That kid's vision is just, it's elite. He may have the best vision of any Seahawk running back not named Marshawn Lynch. And Marshawn didn't care if there was a hole or not. He was going to make his own. So, yeah, it was great watching the run game come together. That not to spoiler alert, that's going to lead us into the next talking point. But yeah, I mean, there was obviously those 2 tackles didn't perform quite as well this second week, which is a little disappointing, knowing that they had a full week of planning with the starters. Stone Forsythe, I think, was the guy that we can really point out didn't really handle his pass blocking assignments as well as he did the week before, but he was put out on an island a lot. I mean, when you go back and watch how we were scheming up if you want to say the inline tight ends or the extra blockers, they were usually on the right side. So Stone Forsythe was kind of left on his own a lot. So I don't want to bag on him too much for giving up the 2 sacks, but he was out on an island, and he was going up against a pretty mean pass rush with the Panthers. So, but yeah, I agree. I mean, if you just look at the stats, it looks like this was a better team than showed up in week 2. I think that might just be because they're finally kind of getting their steam. But yeah, 37 points 2 weeks in a row. It's kind of hard to be mad about that.
No, the offense did really well, and so you can't put too much on the offensive coordinator. He's putting up 37 points. So, like I said, if I'm comparing it to week 2, he didn't quite match up, but I just said it was a top 5 Shane Waldron performance since he's been with the Seahawks. So still praise, and I don't praise the coordinators very often on this show, but Shane Waldron, you actually did a really good job last week. Let's keep it up. As far as, I'm going to go back and touch on some things you said real quick. No, you're fine. You're fine. You can leave it up. So you were talking about Stone Forsythe. I think a lot of negative attention came his way. Listen, he was up against Brian Burns. He was going to have a tough day. And I think we all remember him just getting thrown aside and just faked out of his skin by Brian Burns coming in and sacking Geno Smith for one of those sacks. It was tape you never want as an offensive lineman. And that's what happened. So he did okay as a backup role. I know he got just lambasted by PFF in his PFF grades this week. I think his overall grade was a 50. His pass rush grade was like a 28. It was not good.
Yeah.
As far as the graded out, but he did okay. He was better when he had somebody, a tight end, and they're chipping, or when the guard was able to get a piece, maybe not a true double team, but maybe a hit and then climb to the next level or help out on the inside. So the scheme was okay. Obviously missing the blocking presence of Will Dissly hurt this offense a lot. I mean, Will Dissly was one of the top graded tight ends in the first, or I guess at least in week 2 in the NFL. So missing him is a key thing for this offense. Let's hope he gets back quickly. Big fan of Dissly's here on the show. But let's hit number 2. Number 2 is Pound the Rock. And listen, yes, exclamation point. The offense pounded the rock. We had a season high 146 rush yards. And here's the most astonishing stat of them all, because you know what I've been saying. I've been saying, okay, at least give me 40% rushing. What I really want is 45% rushing. Shane Waldron, I know you're a air the ball out, kind of spread it out kind of guy, and you want to chuck it deep all the time and have receivers. You know, he was a passing game coordinator before he came to Seattle. And he shows, right? That shows. Quarterbacks coach, tight ends coach, passing game coordinator. That's sort of what his needs are. That's what he's been trained for. He wants that. He wants to see the ball flying through the air. But the pass to run ratio in week 3 was 55-45. He nailed it. He nailed exactly what I've been saying we need to do, is a 55-45. And that was exact. That when I did that ratio, it was exactly 55-45. So congratulations, Shane Waldron. Thank you for pounding the rock. Now, when we get Dissly in there, you can set those edges, have some help with those tackles a little bit more. And yeah. So yeah, I say yes. Yes, we did it.
Yeah, like I don't have much to add with that one, except to say it was really great watching Zach Charbonnet actually get some momentum, seeing what the guy that we thought we were drafting in the second round finally came to play this game. Those big, hard runs, soft hands, obviously out of the back. They made some good, nice catches too. But watching him bowl guys over, that's what I was hoping to see, and we got to see it this game.
Yes, we did. In fact, I believe everybody has seen Zach Charbonnet blowing up, trucking the safety Franklin Jr., I believe. I forget his first name. But yeah, in fact, I put it on the thumbnail. Play. If you haven't seen it, just go look at Franklin flying backwards from the impact of Charbonnet going out of bounds.
It's a really good picture. It doesn't quite look like what I think we wanted it to look like, but
I did what I could.
But if you see the action play, it's a great play.
All right, number 3, we have keep Geno clean. Once again, we had backup offensive linemen going in. This game, I think we started the game with 2 out of 5 starting offensive linemen. And then after injuries, Damian Lewis went out. We only had 1 offensive line starter in for, I want to say, 8 or 9 plays.
Yeah.
That's significant.
Yeah.
And those backups held their own. We allowed 15 pressures on 75 offensive snaps.
I'll take that all day long.
Right. Definitely. That broke down to 2 sacks. Both of those were given up by Stone Forsythe. Brian Burns coming off the edge for at least one of those. 4 quarterback hits and 9 hurries.
Yeah, Geno had time. He had time.
Yeah. And he looked good back there.
He looked great back there. 1 interception, obviously notwithstanding, but
it was a bad interception. He threw it.
It was a bad throw. It was a really bad throw. You're going to get those. Every quarterback has them. This is the first one he's done in through 3 weeks. I'm okay with 1 interception every 3 games. I'm fine. Good job, Geno.
Yeah, I'll take it. All right, number 4. Make Dalton feel the heat.
Mm-hmm.
We've been ragging on the defensive performance. And we will some more. Spoiler alert, little foreshadowing. We're going to talk about defense.
Yeah.
This defensive line came to play. The defensive front 7 came to play. At least in run defense and pass rush. Coverage, that's a different story.
Yeah.
There were 79 defensive snaps. And in those 79 defensive snaps, we had 36 pressures. That was 4 sacks, 7 quarterback hits, and 25 hurries. Andy Dalton couldn't sit back and get comfortable. He could not get into a rhythm, and it was all because the defensive line, primarily a couple of our starters on that defensive line, were getting with it. So 100%, we made Dalton feel the heat.
Yeah, it's amazing when you have 3 down linemen with their hands in the dirt, how much more leverage they have at the point of attack. I love the fact that we only saw the 2 down linemen 2 or 3 times with this defense, and I don't think that I ever saw their nose tackle standing up in a 2-point stance because he never should be. And yeah, like I don't know what the difference is or what Pete Carroll or what they did to get this right. But if this is the defensive front we see moving forward, I'm going to back off on my criticism a little bit because this is what a 3-4 defense is supposed to look like. You need 3 guys in that middle. They're going to be collapsing the interior of that pocket and making that quarterback have to get out of the pocket. And that's what they did. So kudos to our defense for at least 1 week so far and out of the 3 weeks of this season for looking like what a 3-4 front is supposed to look like.
I'm not going to be as praiseworthy of their performance as you just were, considering that this is not what a 3-4 should look like, because they only had an A gap.
I was just talking about those 3 guys, just those 3 guys in the front.
No, I agree with you, but they only had an A gap defender on 9% of defensive snaps. So we come up against a team that can actually run the ball. The Panthers can run the ball, but a team that has a bruising running back or a fullback like San Francisco, then we're going to need an inside presence and an inside run stuffing presence. That's something the team is lacking. Jarran Reed has been doing amazing at nose tackle. We'll talk more about him later.
Yes.
But we have not been lining people up in that A gap. We're relying on linebackers to clean up that kind of trash there. And that will not be a winning formula if they can't clean that up.
Yeah, no, Bobby Wagner is is a Hall of Famer. And Jordan Brooks, coming back from that injury, has played lights out. And I think Devin Bush has acquitted himself pretty well while he's been in there. But I don't want those guys to be the first defender that the running back sees in the hole down in, down out.
Yep, I agree. So our 5th key to success was that big play Trey Brown cannot do it
hashtag
alone.
Big play Trey. I like that.
Yeah, I don't know if that was, where that came from, but there it goes. So he can't do it alone. And tell you what, he didn't do it very long because he unfortunately got injured in the second quarter, played 17 snaps on defense, if I'm remembering correctly, out with a concussion. So obviously our hearts go out to Trey Brown as he is recovering from that concussion. Hopefully they give him full time to heal. You never want to mess with somebody's brain. No. So don't rush him back. We have plenty of talent in the secondary.
Yes,
if that talent decides to play like they should and step up.
Cough, Kobe Bryant, cough, cough.
So, while he was out there though, he was tied for 3rd as our highest PFF graded defensive back. Only Julian Love and Devon Witherspoon were graded higher than Trey Brown. And then Michael Jackson, who came in as his relief when he got injured, he actually equaled his score. So overall, those guys acquitted themselves pretty well, and Trey Brown was still playing really well up until that injury.
Yeah, look, I mean, it would have been nice to see him play a full game to see if he could build off last week's performance. But kudos to the rest of our guys for stepping up and stepping in. Michael Jackson came in and looked much better than he has than going back and looking at him for the first part of this season. So way to come out and play like a starter, which is what you were last season. I'll tell you what, Devon Witherspoon, I know we're gonna talk a little bit more about the defense later, but that guy played every snap on defense and looked good doing it.
Yep. He was one of 2 players. I believe the other one is Bobby Wagner.
Yeah, the man's invincible.
Yeah. All right. So we have a formula here. We like some math. Sometimes our math gets a little tricky. I have some wild draft calculations that have worked out pretty well. Hence our identifying players like Puka Nacua, who is
and Jake Bobo
for the Rams,
and Jake Bobo.
I will admit, Adam was championing Jake Bobo. I was saying he'd be a great undrafted free agent, which he was.
He is a great undrafted free agent. Yeah. Another gem for the Seahawks.
Yeah, but we have a little bit of some simple math. And this simple math, we're sending out to Shane Waldron, Pete Carroll, the rest of the coaching staff,
and the 12
coaching staff, and the 12s, right? Tight ends plus the 12s equals win, right? Simple math. So let's keep those tight ends on the field. Let's keep rocking that stadium. And we're going to keep winning here in Seattle.
Yeah, look, I mean, and this is a formula that can travel. We know the 12s travel really well. I mean, just go back and watch that Super Bowl, the Super Bowl win, Super Bowl 48. Just go back and watch that Super Bowl. It was just a sea of 12s, and it sounded like a home game. We know the 12s can travel. What we need to make sure is that our offensive coordinator can also travel with our tight ends, because we're going on the road next week, and it'd be really nice to see this formula in New York next week.
Yeah, and we might need it too, right? That the Giants have played really well, and they just haven't been able to finish games.
Minus week 1. Let's forget week 1 happened, but
so they're 1-2 right now. Obviously, their win came. They were down 17 or 20 points, and they came back in the second half to win that game. Yep. So they're not going to be an easy team. But listen, we got to do what works. This last game showed us that we have to use the tight ends. And we've been saying that on this podcast. It basically should be the let's talk about how good tight ends are on the Seahawks podcast. That should be the true name. We're just going to abbreviate that to Let's Talk Seahawks. But
it's implied. It's implied.
It's implied. There was at least one tight end for 70% of our snaps this week. There were at least 2 tight ends for 57%. At least in this game. That is the formula to success. Get those big guys out there, especially when you have a depleted offensive line. And hey, hats off to the 12s. Like I said earlier, rocking the stadium, forced 8 false starts. And that's how I'm putting that. You forced the false starts.
That's all on the 12s. Absolutely.
Yeah. So pat yourself on the back if you were there. You are credited with 40 yards for our offense, or our defense, I guess. Yes. You are credited with negative 40 yards for the Panthers offense because the crowd played huge in that game.
There were several moments. You go back and watch the game. I was laughing out loud because Andy Dalton's running to the sideline with like 3 seconds left on the play clock. So he's like, I can't hear. He's got to get the play. It was great to watch. So great to watch. I love seeing that kind of energy. That's what we become. That's what I have become used to watching us play home games. I mean, we were spoiled the first several years of the Pete Carroll era because the crowd was so into it. I mean, especially after we drafted Russell Wilson, and when I should say, sorry to kind of keep going back to Russell, but it was really when the Legion of Boom started. Like that crowd every week. I mean, didn't we have 2 seasons where we didn't lose a home game? 2 seasons in a row where we were 8-0 at home. Yeah, beautiful, just beautiful. No notes, 12s. No notes.
No notes. Just keep it up. Keep it up. All right. So before we go to our third, I'm just going to give a quick shout out. We've been ragging on the offense a lot, but currently after week 3, the Seahawks offense is 4th in the NFL when it comes to rankings. So huge credit to the offense for stepping up. Things are still sloppy. Offense. Total offense. Yes. Yeah. So things are still sloppy. There's still things that can improve. And if you can improve on number 4, that's awesome. So let's keep it up. I will say also huge shout out there, our special teams unit, even with Myers missing 2 field goals in Detroit. Obviously, he fixed that average a little bit by hitting 5 of them this past week. So congratulations to Jason Myers for nailing those 5 field goals for us. But our special teams unit as a whole, overall, the NFL ranks 2nd. So huge shout out to the special teams on the Seahawks for getting the job done. Obviously, that's a lot easier when you have all-world punter Michael Dixon playing for you.
All universe punter Michael Dixon.
All universe.
They're in the Milky Way galaxy. There's not a better punter. I guarantee you.
So I just wanted to throw that out. But this last one is going to lead us into our next topic, and that's who stepped up for the defense, and that's the 25th ranked defense in the NFL. So
that's up 5 spots from last week.
That is up 5 spots. But what that does is it pulls the Seahawks overall ranking down to 13 because our offense is really high, our defense is really low, and so you got to average those out.
Yeah, I mean, look, if we want to talk about guys that have stepped up, and we talked about Jarran Reed a little bit coming into this podcast. I've certainly talked about it in the last 2 weeks because he's opened my eyes. We re-signed Jarran Reed, brought Jarran Reed back, not re-signed him. When we brought Jarran Reed back, it was kind of unheralded. It was like, I mean, obviously, the big story of the offseason was bringing Bobby back, and with good reason. The man is probably the greatest Seahawks middle linebacker ever, and I loved Lofo back in the day. But Bobby is maybe the best defender in Seahawks history. So I love the fact that he's back. The Jarran Reed signing has been really underrated because I didn't think he was going to come in and be able to play nose tackle. He's obviously kind of, with our scheme, that's a little bit of a misnomer calling him a nose tackle, but he is making a name for himself in the middle of that defensive line. The man, I mean, just watch. You can't run past him. Do not run up the middle if Jarran Reed's out there because you won't get any yards. He's not letting anybody pass him in the running game. And he is able to take on at least one, if not two blockers a lot and push that pocket back. This, I think, was probably his best game all year. And that's saying something because he has had 3 good games in a row. Even the Rams game, he was making an impact. Jarran Reed, I think, is the best signing of our offseason. We can talk a little bit. I'm sure you'll talk about Julian Love a little bit. But yeah, I can't say enough. The man has been dominant in the middle of that defensive line. It's been a pleasure to watch him play.
Yeah, he's stepped up huge. I was very skeptical when they said he was going to be playing nose.
Yeah, ditto.
But I thought they were going to be playing more of a traditional 3-4 where you actually have an A-gap defender. Jarran Reed played 2 snaps in the A-gap this game. Out of, I want to say he played 47, 48 snaps. I don't have the numbers up in front of me.
Well, he played, 59% of the defensive snaps. So, yeah, somewhere around there.
Yeah. So, it's hard to call him a nose. He's not playing nose. This is a noseless 3-4. We have just defensive tackles, primarily in the B gaps. I mean, our rookie, whose name is just eluding me,
Cameron Young.
Nose tackle, Cameron Young. He played the most time in the A gap. He played 4 snaps in the A gap,
just double what anybody else played in the A gap,
which is double the next guy, which was Jarran Reed. So it's hard for me to call him a nose tackle because he's not a nose tackle. He might be playing the nose position as they draw the X's and O's on the board because you always put, an E for the end and an N for the nose. And, even in a 4-3, you have E, N, T, E, right? You separate the tackle from the nose. But at least that's how I do it and how a lot of other guys do it. So technically he is playing the nose position, but he's not playing nose tackle. All right. So one of the guys that's huge, and I just mentioned him, playing the end position, that's Mario Edwards. Mario Edwards, who had a Seahawks defense leading PFF grade of 90.9.
That's his overall?
Yeah, overall.
Oh, wow.
In this week 3 game. He had
what was his pass rush grade?
90... like 90.8. So really up there. He didn't get any sacks. He had 9 pressures of those 36 that we had talked about earlier. 9 of those came from Edwards. 3 hits, 6 hurries. He was getting it done, taking on a lot of single blocks. So we'll see if they start doubling him, which should open things up more for Jarran Reed to get a little push more in the middle. Who knows?
Open up the edge guys. Let's get Nwosu and Boye Mafe some more sacks.
Well, yeah. I mean, those guys actually played pretty well. Boye Mafe, I'll spotlight here. 80.1 grade. He had 7 pressures himself. 1 sack, 1 hit, 5 hurries. So that line is really, really doing work. I only wrote down 4 or 5 guys we wanted to talk about. 4 guys here. And look, Boye Mafe, Jarran Reed, Mario Edwards. We're talking basically about the line, right? And those lines, they're getting it done. So Jarran Reed also had a great grade. He graded out as a 90.4. He had 5 pressures himself. Those 2 sacks. So awesome game for him. 1 hit, 2 hurries. Just playing huge there on the line.
Yeah.
I know you wanted to talk about the rookie.
Yeah. Look, I already mentioned that Devon Witherspoon played every defensive snap for the 2nd week in a row. He played every defensive snap in Detroit. He played every defensive snap in this game against the Panthers. I'm sold. Devon Witherspoon is that guy. Look, we haven't seen the big, huge plays, but go out and just watch him play. He is 100% in on every single play. That man's motor does not stop. No, we haven't seen a huge hit or a big pass breakup in the end zone, but he had what 3 pass breakups this game. I think he was targeted a total of what 13 times.
5 defensive stops, which is huge. Those are like defensive lineman numbers. He had 5 defensive stops. He had 11 tackles. I mean, he graded out at a 70, so you could say that that's average. He did, I believe, have a missed tackle. He allowed 5 receptions on 13 targets.
For how many yards?
His total yards is right around 30, so it's not like that was really hurting us. His
less than 5 yards a play.
His longest reception he gave up was probably 14 yards, I think. So really doing well. He had an 82.9 tackling grade. So don't let that, 70 kind of fool you out here. He actually was playing pretty well. I don't think he played at a 70 level. I'm not the biggest fan of PFF grades. They give supposedly non-biased look at all the players across the league. That's why I'll look at them, because it kind of lets us compare apples to apples. But I think he played definitely better than that 70. And he's only going to get better from here. When Tariq Woolen is healthy, talk about defensive coordinator's dream, having 2 tandem guys out there at corner. Offensive coordinators, they're going to be having nightmares about trying to figure out what to do.
Who are you going to throw to on the outside? Where you want to go? You want to go to the guy that's got 4.3 speed? If he catches the ball, he's gone and it's a touchdown. Or do you want to go to the guy that's so physical that your receiver's not going to get a hand on the ball no matter how hard he tries? I mean, and I don't think we've seen it yet. And we can get into this a little bit. I know we'd said before we want to talk about it. We already mentioned how great the defensive line has been playing. That front 7, the back 4 or 5, depending on the scheme, hasn't played as well. But take Devon Witherspoon out of that equation. He has played lights out these last 2 weeks. I love everything that I've seen from him. I mean, I think when we did our draft analysis, you had him rated as your number 1 quarterback. I had a guy who's now in New England a little bit higher. And that's basically, and for me, it was a lot just because I thought Christian Gonzalez was more of a natural fit for the Seahawks defense. I'm glad that I'm not working there, because Pete Carroll probably would have laughed in my face when I said that. And yeah, I mean, perfect fit. Devon Witherspoon is a perfect fit for this defense, perfect fit for this team. Yeah, I can't wait to see what he looks like down the stretch of this season.
Yeah, like I said, I'm a defensive backs guy, former defensive backs coach. That's what I know. That's what I love. I can't wait to see how this guy develops. And that's why I'm so hard on the defensive coaching staff, because we're playing really soft zones and nobody in coverage seems to know what they're doing. So let's get it together. Quandre Diggs is amazing. We love Quandre Diggs on this podcast. Quandre Diggs gave up a perfect NFL quarterback rating when he was targeted in this last game. So
he was targeted twice.
But that's not good enough.
No.
And last year he kind of had a slow start. He's coming off an injury. I think the reluctance of NFL coaching staffs to play their key players in preseason is what's causing all of these slow, rusty starts by all these teams. I know they don't want guys to get hurt, but guys still need to see action. They still need to read a defense or an offense, respective side, that they're not going up against every day in practice. There's a difference between game speed and practice speed. Even when you have a joint practice with another team, it's not the same as a game. So I would like them to play the guys a little bit more in preseason. Not a lot. You don't have to have them out there for full games like we used to.
No, just a series or 2.
Yeah, let's let them get a little bit of a rhythm so that week 1 is not, let's knock off as much rust as we can.
Yeah.
Because then you get to week 3 and guys are still making mistakes that they would have been making week 1, 2-3 years ago. So Quandre Diggs will turn it around. Oh, yeah. I have full faith on that. I mean, last year he ended up a Pro Bowler, and the first couple weeks of the season, we were like, "Oh, what's happened to Quandre?"
Yeah. He did not look good, but I mean, again, came on strong at the end. I fully
Yep.
expect the same thing for this season. I already put a prop bet on that he would get 5 interceptions this season, which has been his average since joining the Seahawks. I fully expect him to get that. He wants to go for he said he wants to hit a career high of 6. I'd love to see it, but got to make sure and be in on that play and not allow a perfect passer rating, buddy. But yeah, I have no I I don't have any questions about the talent in the back half of this defense. None. I saw what Julian Love did last year. I know what he can do. I've seen Jamal Adams when healthy, what he's capable of. I know what Quandre Diggs can do. Watching Devon Witherspoon, obviously we saw Tariq last year. I know we've got talent back there. It's the scheme that I'm worried about. I'm not sure that we're putting our guys in the best position to make plays yet. And I'm leading into this, what we're going to be talking about next. But I need to see what this defense looks like when everybody's healthy. And we haven't seen it yet. I don't think they know where all the pieces are going to fit yet with these guys. And we need to get that together. That should have been what we did in the offseason. This is game time. We should know what we're doing.
No, I completely agree. I've not been a fan of this scheme since it debuted last year. I was very critical of Clint Hurt. A lot of that was he's a defensive line specialist, and our defensive line was the worst in the NFL last year. Obviously, this season, we've changed some personnel out. They've had a little bit more time. Had a little bit more time to adjust, brought some draft picks in. They are looking better, as we just praised them for the last 20, 30 minutes. But I am still not sold on this defense. Schematically, I don't like it. I didn't like it when they announced it. I didn't like what I saw last year. So I don't know what they're going to do. They need to get rid of these soft Fangio zones. They need to play with some physicality, get out there and play some football. And we're still missing the mark. We were number 2 in the NFL, the wrong direction. So let me rephrase that. We were 31st in the NFL in missed tackles, meaning we had the second most missed tackles in the NFL coming into this game. And the defense went and we missed 7 tackles in this game, credited with 7 tackles. That's not good. That's not good enough. The main example of this, and this is where I'm going to talk about Julian Love, which is not a good point, but I believe Julian Love can be a
overall
key contributor on this defense. So I'm not ragging on Julian Love. What I'm saying is an example of the missed tackles and what is not being focused on in coaching, and you can see that on the field, is on Shark's 47-yard touchdown. Obviously, it was a broken coverage. I believe Michael Jackson was responsible, and that was the busted coverage. Julian Love was the safety that was back, that was supposed to clean up that play. And what he did is came over. He didn't have a good breakdown. He went for the hit and whiffed. And Shark put a little wiggle on him, went in for the touchdown. That should have been breakdown, wrap up, drive him to the ground. You have to play with fundamentals, especially when you're the last man back. You want to be risky, go for a hit. Yeah, you can do that around the line of scrimmage. You can do that in those first 5 yards. Obviously, you need to make more tackles than you miss. But it's not as risky when you're there, when you have other defensive players around you who can clean up your trash if you miss that tackle. You can't do that 30 yards downfield to one of the fastest guys on the field, knowing you're the last defender that guy has to get by. And that's coaching. That's something they need to drive into those players. Where's the hawk tackling?
Yeah.
Where?
And look, I think that's communication. Again, kind of spoiling for the end of it, or what my final thoughts were going to be, but the communication in this backfield isn't what it used to be. And I know, look, I mean, I don't ever expect there to be another era like the Legion of Boom. But what made that defense great? It wasn't, I mean, yes, they were all playmakers and they could all put on a great show individually, but the communication was perfect. I mean, they knew where everybody was at all times. Cam Chancellor, one of the greatest Seahawks defensive backs of all time, in my opinion. Love that man. And yes, he was known for his big hits, but he was not going to try and lay somebody out if he didn't know Earl Thomas was there to clean up if he missed. And he always knew where he go back and watch. There was never a time where he was going to try and lay a big hit on a guy where he didn't know he had a backup. That's the thing. Communication isn't quite there. And I know there's a lot of moving pieces and new guys, and we haven't seen them all come together yet. But that's what we need to be working on. It's got to be about communication. And especially when we're playing those soft zones, you've got to know where everybody else is. And that does not look like we do currently on this defense.
No. And in fact, you talked about final thoughts. Do you just want to go right into your final thoughts here?
Yeah, look, I mean, I can just kind of continue with what I'm saying. Look, I've said it several times already during this podcast, and I've said it already several times this year. We haven't seen this defensive backfield at full strength. Now, a lot of that's because Jamal Adams hasn't been out there. You know, I mean, he's coming off of injury. I don't want to see him out there till he's ready to go. I know that he wants to be out there. I mean, go back and look. I mean, if you're on Twitter, or on X, whatever.
It's Twitter.
Yeah, it'll always be Twitter. It should still be Twitter. But if you go back and look at it, I mean, he's raring to go. The Prez is ready. He wants to be out there with his teammates. He is going full bore in every practice. They've had to slow him down in practices because he's playing lights out. Wants to be out there. Wants to be in on it. And we haven't seen him what this defense is going to look like when he's out there. But I honestly don't know if our defensive coordinator and or even Pete Carroll has a plan for when he's out there, because we should ostensibly have a plan. And I use it, I know, buzzword. It's a word I throw out all the time. But we should have had a plan all along when he hasn't been out there, and I haven't seen that. A lot of moving pieces, a lot on this defense, and I know the guys have been getting hurt. But we've got to have this defense. Like, go back and again in the Legion of Boom era, a guy went out, another guy came in, no loss of communication. Like when Brandon Browner went out and Byron Maxwell came in, didn't matter. When Trufant was in at nickel corner, or if it was somebody else, it didn't matter. It shouldn't matter now. We know that we knew we weren't going to have Jamal Adams for the first several weeks of this season. It doesn't look like we planned for him not to be out there. Like last year, Ryan Neal was able to step in and fill that void. Julian Love doesn't have the same experience in this team. Ryan Neal had been on and off the Seahawks roster for several years. He knew this scheme in the back. You can't be relying on Julian Love coming in here right away. I know he's a great player, but you can't just say, hey, shove him in and you're going to be filling up this role where we just kind of move you around all over the place. So I need to see it. Jamal Adams, I don't know if he's going to be here this week in New York. Hopefully he is. It'd be great to see him. I mean, obviously he knows that stadium. So I'd love to see him out there in New York. But if not, when Jamal Adams finally does come back on the field, I need to see the finished product. If the finished product is as sloppy as the product has been these first 3 weeks, it's going to be a long season.
Yeah. So my final thoughts, I'm going to have a little bit of sugar and a little bit of spice here, right? Our
Hashtag
defense.
Dad. Hashtag girl dad.
Yeah. Hashtag girl dad. There you go. Our defense is scary. It's scary. But I'll tell you what, it's not scary good. Okay. It's scary to the fans.
I didn't know where you're going with that.
Right. What are we going to get? We don't know week to week what defense is going to show up. Is this the defense that only allowed 44 yards rushing this game? Right. That's great. They allowed 3 yards per rush, which is right at the season average, keeping guys bottled up. Or is this the defense that my grandmother could complete a pass against? Right. Are these guys who schematically are failing in certain areas, even though we have all the talent in the world on the field? We have to find a way to get it together. How is this defense going to come together? I said last week that I had all the faith in the world in Pete Carroll to get this team ready for this game because we felt this may have been a little bit of a trap game. And he did, right? He got the team ready to go. So can we do it again? Is this going to be a week-to-week process where we don't know if this defense is going to be stout, if they're going to be pressuring the quarterback on half of the plays like they did this last game, or are they going to be that team that got 5 pressures and in 81 snaps in week 1? Those aren't the actual stats, but it was something abysmal like that.
It was bad. It was bad.
we just need to see it. We need to see how this is going to shake out. So I have faith. I have faith that they can pull it together because I have faith in the coaching staff. Listen, we had like one of the worst, I think we were ranked 30th last year in rush defense. And they kept the Panthers, who are a running team, with a backup quarterback to 44 yards in that game. So that's a big positive. Huge shout out to them for that. I'm going to end on that positive note. Thank you for listening and watching the Let's Talk Seahawks podcast. If you're catching us on YouTube, please subscribe. It helps the channel. If you're out there in the audio podcast world, hey, youtube.com/Let's Talk Seahawks. Come check us out, or just go ahead and give us a subscribe there on whatever platform you're listening to. Thank you for listening or watching. As always, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.